Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, as we'll be relaxing as per usual. It is getting pretty hot again this week, and am I a bit tired? Yeah, I'm a bit tired. It's been an exhausting past week, in a good way, I suppose. Certainly can't complain, or at least it'd be strange to complain, perhaps. Not have a heat wave and then have many things to do. But we continue on. Hello everyone, right now in Fawnhallow at 6:34 PM on Monday, July 6th, 2026. We got the summer fishing tourney, which of course we all promptly ignore. And oh yes, okay, so we're going to talk about things. Nine Souls? Want to talk about Nine Souls today? I think today's a good time to talk about Nine Souls. So Nine Souls might be like, what's that? Well, may I direct you to a series that I played on this YouTube channel for like the last 4 or 5 months. I'm not actually sure exactly how long I played it for. Can't remember how many episodes there were. But anyway, Nine Souls, what's my overall thoughts on it? It's a great game. I very much liked it. Hello, no, not Yuka, you're Sydney. I thought you were Yuka for a moment. Yuka is blue. Benedict. And oh, Egbert, I keep thinking you're Benedict. Benedict is a red one. Wow. Bad showing. Okay. So, sorry. Nine Souls. Actually talking about Nine Souls. My overall thoughts on Nine Souls is it's a really great game. It's actually maybe my favourite Metroidvania. Competing with Hollow Knight, but it has been a while since I played Hollow Knight. But it's a very lore, like story-driven, I should say, not necessarily lore-driven Metroidvania, where the story and the themes is frontmost and centre in this game. But otherwise, it's got your standard sort of 2D platform Metroidvania. You have different areas which you explore, different abilities which you unlock, and it's very much based around its combat, which has a very sort of zippy, nice, and I will say the combat has a really nice flow to it, because it's all about landing in your attacks, weaving in parries, and then trying to explode all your damage using this, what's it called, the talisman attack. So it has a really nice sort of flow to it, and it's a game which is very much inspired by Chinese culture, but technically I think I should say East Asian culture, because it's not exclusively Chinese culture, but I think largely it's a Taiwanese studio, I think. I'm not actually sure about that. Let me double check that before I just randomly say so, but it is a great game. If you like Metroidvania, yes, Taiwanese, I would highly recommend playing it. I think it's very slick. I think it's very nice. I think the only reason I wouldn't recommend it is if you're looking for a purely mechanical experience without like story, then this game has a lot of story, and a lot of it I think is built on the feeling of a story. Is that a perfect game? That's a really good question. It's a sort of thing where it's like I can't think of something I would fault it for. Like there are other games which I probably enjoyed a lot as well, but have also been like, this is something I'm like I would change about it. I think the only thing I might change about it is I think the difficulty jumps are kind of not very smooth. They feel like sort of like they plateau and then they jump up and they plateau, and they jump up and then they plateau. And it does feel like everything comes, like the entire mechanic combat system does feel like it was made for the final boss first. Because there are some bosses which are like a bit iffy with it, is how I'd say. But I will warn you before I get into light spoilers and heavy spoilers. I think the music in this game is absolutely phenomenal. I think its animations are very slick as well. Its character designs are all very interesting, and I think a lot of it, which is really cool, is how much it draws from Chinese mythology in general. And all the characters' names are Chinese mythos characters. Granted, some of their English translations aren't using the Chinese names, which does explain a lot why sometimes I was like, I feel like that says something different to what the English says, but I think it's a linguistic choice. The graphics are very snappy. It's just a very smooth game to play, is what I'd say. And I think it has a lot of things which, in Metroidvanias, which are nice, sort of like quality of life sort of things. What else? Yeah, I think that's the only two things I'd say about it, is that some of the bosses are like real big jumps in difficulty, and some of the bosses are a bit more iffy in their design. In my opinion, I don't think I had that much like grievance against them, and I don't mean like on a difficulty level. In this case, I mean like at a design level. But some of them I definitely have been like, iffy. Anyway, this is your mild spoiler warning. So, Nine Souls, of course, is centering around this character Yi, the titular character, well, not titular character, and it's a very grotesque and I think very brutal game. Grotesque is the wrong word. It is a very brutal game. I guess it is kind of grotesque at the same time, but it's very, very dystopian is probably the way I put it. Where it's called Tau Punk is the general aesthetic it goes for, which is like a combination, if you don't know what that is, think of it as like a East Asian inspired cyberpunk. Which I think is very cool, and I think it plays very well into its aesthetic, like it does very, very well. It follows basically somewhere in the far future you play this cat-like character Yi, you seemingly killed by someone, and he's basically going to get revenge on the 10 Soul Council somehow to do something or another once he collects it. I mean, the premise of the game is very sort of MacGuffin, go here, collect your things. But I think what makes it very interesting is how I think the game unfolds from there. Like I said, the combat is very nice because the combat has a nice flow between the auto-attacking with a sword, parrying, which was really nice, unbounded parrying counters, which is something which comes later, and then a talisman attack, which you sort of attach on, because I think it has a very interesting mechanic, which is this internal health mechanic, where basically when you deal damage to enemies, part of it will be permanent damage. It's kind of like a fighting game mechanic if you play like Marvel vs. Capcom, like Red Health. Part of it is direct damage you do, and then part of it is like chipped red damage, and that red damage is considered internal damage, and you can only, I think, deal damage to it by using a talisman. Otherwise, is it something like if the enemy hits you, they regenerate that health back or something like that? I can't remember the exact specifics, but your main character works that way as well, where every hit you take, some of it will be permanent damage and some of it will be regeneratable damage. Sorry, if you parry things incorrectly, but then if you take an actual hit, then all of that plus the internal damage gets taken away. So it's very much a game, I think, mechanically, which has a nice sort of feel and style to it, but I would also say, as smooth as it is, it's very, very, very parry focused, and that becomes abundantly clear later on, where I would say some of the later fights are essentially parry builds seem to be the best way to go about it. Which could be a caveat depending on how much you like parry systems in general. I think it does feel quite nice, but of course your mileage may vary. Depending on how much you click with a parry system, depends on how much I think you'll like the game, of the combat of the game. But what I think the game really shines more so than other Metroidvanias is its narrative presence. It goes through a really, really nice sort of character exploration. Well, I'm going to say heavy spoilers from here on out. If you haven't played the game, definitely go play it. I will be spoiling potentially anything which happens in the story now. But you follow Yi, and you like, he's kind of like ambiguous. He's kind of like, he seems like a hero, but he's also like a brooding sort of character in a way. Maybe like a Batman-esque sort of. You're not exactly sure where you should stand with him, maybe. Well, some interpretations of Batman. And as you go on the journey, you basically discover that this entire journey of Nine Souls is his own sort of progression, his own sort of forgiveness from his previous mistakes, his old way of thinking, and a new understanding on life. You know, I loved especially how his story with his younger sister Heng unfurled, because at first they just become in as mysterious phone calls, which you don't really understand the context of. It's a younger sister who seems to be leaving you voicemails, and you're like, where is this younger sister? You get the impression that she's probably deceased in some way or another, but you can sort of see their contrasting ideals, and you see these memories of a past, where you can see his very sort of scientific, rigid, logistical nature, and then Heng's contrast to it. They're sort of like a yin and yang. And I love how it progresses as then you eventually learn more and more about lore of what's going on, and when you realise that, oh, she's been long dead. These are voicemails which she sent light years away, which have only now just caught up. And you see what unfolds in his and her story, where you see basically a final fight where he goes on. So I guess, spoilers, I guess if you don't care about them, this is an Eternal Cauldron project. Their entire species was dying. And he proposed the idea, let's basically build a spaceship, put people in cryopreservation as we set ourselves to this location, use solar energy from the sun and use that perpetuation of life to try and develop a cure, essentially, because their home planet was also dying. And then Hung has a sort of like let's embrace return to nature sort of acceptance, while Yi has the perspective of no, we should fight and resist it and change, no matter what, almost no matter what cost. And then you see their final confrontation where they just have where Yi regrets it, and then Hung just says, you know, that I can't remember the exact lines, but how there's nothing to necessarily regret, we just chose different paths in life, which I just went, oh, beautiful. And I think it's just a taste of like how good the writing is in the game, how the dialogue and, you know, the progression of the characters and the perspectives all feel very raw and all very grounded and make sense to them. So it's like a really nice interesting dichotomy of like death and life there, and then also I think contrasts very well with Aigong, who is the final boss, who apparently is also called Yigong in the Chinese name, but apparently they changed her name because they didn't want to have association with Yi, or make people think that Yi and Yigong had an association, because the Chinese characters, I believe, are different. Anyway, another point. Where I love this little twist, where Yigong is basically someone who's obsessed with the idea of immortality. She wants to make the species immortal. In doing so, she does her research, and she accidentally develops the virus, which will end up killing the entire species, the Tianhua virus, through her immortality experimentations. A mistake to which she goes, oh no, but also she can use it to sort of kickstart a new scientific wave, because science kind of has been sort of like outlawed, kind of, in the Lord. It's a bit complex to say. And then seeing it like really made me appreciate her as a character, because she has this very sort of stern, solemn, master type character. And to see her ambitions, to see her drive, you can sort of understand it, but not empathize or sympathize necessarily with it, where she so wanted for people to be immortal, because like fair enough, extending of life, and then it's absolutely a huge costly mistake to, in the process of doing that, wipe out your entire species and your civilization. Obviously something which weighs very mentally hard on her, and she must see success at any progression necessary. And then when she discovers a cure, quote quote, or she discovers two things. One, that removing the Tianhua virus reverts the Solarians, the species, back to domestic cats. So it's kind of implied that the Tianhua virus is what makes them sentient, clever, sapient. At the same time, developing a cure for it, she finds she can't develop a very good cure. She develops a mutant cure, which mutates her body beyond all recognition and kind of like saps away their sentience. But she's so deluded, she so wants things to work, but she sort of moves her own goalposts and goes like, yes, this is an immortality cure I was discovering all along, and now she sees this as a superior way to live. And you can see the sort of machinations and manipulation, where at first you're just like, oh, she's just absolutely deluded in what immortality she wants. Is your first impressions, I suppose, of her, but then as you learn more about her through her logs, you find out, yeah, she is deluded, but also I can see why she's deluded, because she couldn't handle the fact that she basically ended her entire civilization, which is a heavy, heavy burden. But you get to see all these other sort of characters who make up a whole colourful cast of different characters who all perpetuate this sort of lie, where she basically sparks off the Eternal Cauldron project. She hides the fact from Yi as well, that she was the one who caused this virus. And then you get to see the sort of complicit nature of all the other members of a council. And we'll sort of rapid fire go through them. You see Gormang has a really interesting story about she was really poor for all her life, and then she wanted to make sure she never lived without, but she was also really talented, like a prodigy. Like all these people are here, like the best of the best, essentially. And revolutionized agriculture to help actually feed everyone, but at the cost of like a certain level of cruelty and sadism, shall we say. You see Jiatong try and basically live up to the name of a legacy that his family sort of left behind as this militaristic might, which he deemed himself never being strong enough for, so he kept wanting to get stronger and stronger, which eventually became his undoing. Yan Lao, this archivist who is so latched onto the idea of, you know, like legacy and archiving his history, because that's what he got appreciation for throughout his life, and that he can't let go, I suppose, of a past, essentially. Lady Ethereal, also called Hujie in Chinese, which means butterfly. which I think is a very pretty name. I'm not sure why that one's changed necessarily, but she's one where she basically developed the cryo. It's not called cryokinesis, the cryopods or whatever they're called, to put people into like an endless dream. As if they're like sleeping, and then she was the one who was basically like, yep, it definitely works, it'll be all good, we can use it for the project, but she was the only one who really knew that it didn't work at all. In fact, the problem was that the dreams that the people were put in were so blissful, when they came back to reality, people couldn't handle reality and started ending their own lives. You can see there's such a delicious tragedy, I think, interwoven in all of these stories, which really sort of accentuates the nature of how brutal Nine Souls is, how much it sort of hangs on the fact that, like, maybe in a different life things could have worked out. If just some things had been different, someone spoke up, Icon wasn't so obsessed with the idea of immortality, someone said something different along a different way, they could have had a happy ending, but they didn't. It's sort of like a hubris mixed in there. When you get Fuxi and Nuwa, who are my favourite aesthetic characters, because their entire thing is they're based off Chinese opera, which is so cool. But they're basically just like rich kids or whatever. But they have a tragic story of Nuwa being like a sort of rich noble who will probably become head of a house and has like these nice ideas and stuff, but eventually succumbing to the Tianhua virus, and Fuxi carrying so much. Sorry, switch your names then. When I said Nuwa there, I meant Fuxi. And then Nuwa caring so much for Fuxi, not wanting him to die, basically accepted this sort of funding, this experimental research of a cure that Aigong was developing as a means to try and sort of stave off the Tianhua virus. Again, very brutal, very heart-wrenching. And then you can see how they basically completely given up because they don't really have as many skills. You know, they can't save the world, and as you play the game, you see everything is just going down the drain. She just ends up partying and deluding herself that Fuxi is still alive. Who else? Oh, I missed out Kwafu, who's just a jolly Uncle Chubby, as he's called. Where I don't know what else to say about him except for it's nice to see his progression from. I didn't even talk about the ape men, who are basically humans, who the Solarians see as like lesser beings and basically farmed them essentially for food and their computing power of their brains, which is something which Yi himself suggested, which is crazy. But you see Kwafu's general trend from going from hating the ape men to being quite affectionate and leading them. Have I missed any? I think that's all of them, the 9 souls. You see Shan as well, who is basically the one who changed. You got him to see and appreciate, not see the ape men as sort of lesser beings in life, and just a ray of sunshine where he even tells basically Shan at some point that like he was the one who basically caused his parents to die, caused his entire race as well, not quite the extinction, but so much hardship, because they basically pretended to be deities or something to them and harvested them in this sort of like ritualistic sacrifice, and Shan still sort of forgives because he sees Yi as his friend, and it's so heartwarming and it's so gut-wrenching when Yi at the end basically sacrifices his life to stop Gormang's corruption of everything and to let the ape men have a chance at living their life. It's so beautiful. What a beautiful game. What a brutal game at the same time. Oh yes, I suppose small caveats as well of what I said the difficulty was. I think the jump up to Lady Ethereal's fight is really too big, to be honest. Okay, so Gormang's fight is a bit iffy. Like I see a lot of people complaining about it. I don't remember having that much issue with it, that much grievance with it. It was a little bit annoying, but not extremely annoying. But a lot of people had a lot of grievance with it, which is fair enough. Just bear that in mind. Kwafu's fight, I think, is fine. Yala's fight is interesting, I think, framing. Lady of Heroes, I think, is way too big a jump up. Like, I think the other fights could have been bumped up in difficulty a little bit, but apparently you can do those 3 fights in any order, which I didn't know. Fuxi and Nuwa, I also think is actually quite an annoying fight. It doesn't feel as smooth as the other fights. It kind of, Fuxi and Nuwa and Gormang kind of have the same thing because of our overlapping sort of attacks. Sorry, little jump cut there. But it doesn't always feel so smooth because of our overlapping sort of attacks and stuff. And then I think we jump up to Gormang, at least True Ending Gormang is really, really a mega jump up. And I will say, it kind of feels like what the entire combat is made out of. Oh, I forgot G! I forgot about the Timeless Immortal, the Seer, who basically wastes away just being passively observing everything rather than taking any sort of action. because everything is sort of predetermined in his mind. Anyway, that's not the point. Really, really cool as well. Like, G is also a great character. Don't think the fact I forgot him means he's not. I think 10 characters is just a lot to think about. Yeah. What was I going to say about this? I can't remember anymore. Yeah, I think the jump up to Aigong is like really, really crazy difficult. I think it's like Lady Ethereal took me 2 or 3 videos or something. I think Gormang took me like 6 videos or something. So it's quite a jump up, shall we say. But yeah, the fight's really, like, that's the only thing I would say is that 2 of the fights are, I think, a bit iffy because it doesn't feel as smooth compared to how smooth the other game is. The other fights are, Aigong's fight is so incredibly smooth. It feels like a work of art. I will say the jump up and difficulties don't feel very smooth either. The side stories are also really cool because you have the character Gio. Interesting to kind of see his perspective, his story. I forgot what the data map person is called, but that was also quite an interesting one. Learning about the Night Guardians, or whatever they're called, Twilight Guardians, Dusk Guardians, that's what they're called. Seeing where logs sort of strewn about was really cool. Yeah, I think there was just a lot of really like nice ways the stories were developed, and these general themes, I suppose, of death, I suppose, in general, were very well explored, and the characters were super engaging. I loved it. If you like a story-based game and you like Metroidvanias, this is definitely a good game to play. It's very sort of, I think, explicit with its story compared to other games which might be sort of more lore-based. Is that good or bad? That's up to you. You might find it too dialogue heavy. You might just want to be like, skip, let's get to the mechanics. I don't know. Music slaps so hard. What's my favourite theme? Lady Ethereal's theme is my favourite, although Fuxia Noir's is a close second. It's also good. Anyway, that's my vibe on Nine Souls. If you've gotten to this point, probably you've already checked it out, but if you haven't, then please do so. Otherwise, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been here, darling. Likes, comments, subscription, share, it's greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. Oh, I didn't title today's In Stars and Times video. Bye-bye for now.